Well, this is Andrew King. Before yesterday, I didn't know anything about Andrew King, but I saw a tweet that he tweeted out, and it was the dumbest tweet that I've seen in the year 2020, which this year is it's saying something. Yeah, I'm not kidding. This tweet was really dumb. So I looked into this guy, and I normally I would just scroll past it, but I wanted to see because a couple people were mentioning it. And his profile says that he's a Christian husband, father, assistant professor of biblical studies at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, assistant dean of Spurgeon College, and associate editor of this Old Testament journal. So an Old Testament scholar, it seems, a professor, a mover. This guy looks like an up-and-comer in Big Eva, most likely. No blue check mark, but definitely on that track. And the tweet that he tweeted out that I said was the dumbest tweet that I've seen all year, which a lot of people were making fun of me because we've had some pretty dumb tweets this year. This is just my personal opinion, is this tweet. And the way it reads is, it seems that Breonna Taylor was 26 years too old for some Christians to mourn. God help us. Hashtag Breonna Taylor. This is stupid, guys. This is really stupid. And I had a Twitter follower say that I say stupid too much because sometimes he listens with his kids, and his kids started to say stupid. Sorry about that, but I did check the not necessarily made for kids commentary section on YouTube. So anyway, but this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous, and I think that especially an Old Testament scholar ought to know that, to be perfectly honest with you, the Old Testament isn't as widely covered in Christian circles. It isn't as widely known, and many people might not know how the Old Testament applies to the Breonna Taylor case. But even if they did, and Andrew King didn't know that for some reason, that the Old Testament case laws, they're not really taught in Christian circles very often. They're not really known by the run-of-the-mill Christian. Even if you didn't know that, Andrew, this is a really stupid, idiotic take. There's just no question about it, because the comparison of abortion, which is what he's trying to say, if Breonna Taylor was aborted as a fetus or as an infant, then people would care about her, but because she was killed in a police raid, nobody cares about her. That's insane. Andrew, and it's almost embarrassing for me to have to explain this to you, but apparently I do have to explain it to you, because you see, people make choices, bad and good choices, and it doesn't mean they deserve to die necessarily, but we understand that there's a very big difference between a baby being in the place where that baby belongs, in the womb, probably the safest place that you could possibly imagine when you're so vulnerable, you've made no choices in your life essentially, and you're just there completely dependent on your mother, and your own mother kills you in that place of safety and security, even though you've done nothing good or bad at this point. You've just existed. You're just growing. You're just your brain is starting to develop and stuff like that. Like, there is a chasm of difference between that and someone who's made a series of poor choices that ended up leading to her death. Now, again, hear me saying that doesn't mean she deserved to die, but what it does mean is that these were completely different situations. Let me tell you a little story from my own past, because I'm a man who's made a lot of very poor decisions in his life. And so before I was a Christian, I was a train wreck. I was an absolute train wreck, and I would hang out with the wrong crowds. I would do the wrong things. I would take drugs. I would do alcohol, the whole thing, right? I did everything. And I remember one time I had broken up with my girlfriend at the time, and a few months later she invited me to a party, and I was all about it. I wanted to go to it. She didn't live in a very good neighborhood. She lived in a mostly black neighborhood, and it was the kind of neighborhood that you would expect there'd be a lot of drug activity and stuff like that. So I was there at her house, and she had some people over, and there was this one guy that I started getting to know and talking to. He was a cool guy. He was a black dude. And we were just chatting and stuff like that. Anyway, at one point, we needed to get more alcohol, and so he goes, "Yeah, I'll go. Why don't you drive me?" And because I wasn't drinking at the time, because I think I had to go back to school or something like that. And I was like, "Sure, I'll drive you." So I drove him to the liquor store around the corner, And I'll never forget what he was getting. He was getting that Alizé stuff. If you've ever had Alizé, that's what he wanted to get. So we pull up to the liquor store, and he's in the passenger seat, and all of a sudden his mood just changes. It went like this. We were joking, laughing, smiling. All of a sudden, his mood just changes, and he's like, "Oh man!" And I'm gonna censor him because he was talking, he was talking rough, and he was saying, "Oh man, you see that guy over there?" I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "That guy's gonna be trouble here. It's gonna be trouble here." And he pulls out from his pocket a knife, and he pulls out this knife, and he goes, "I'm gonna have to take this with me." And I said, whoa, what are you doing? Like I was sober. You know what I mean? I was totally sober. And this guy pulls out a knife. I go, what are you doing? And he goes, yeah, me and that guy have some beef, this and that. And I didn't know this guy at all. I had no knowledge of this man before this night. All I knew was that he dressed like you would expect, sort of a thug to dress, and he was hilarious. He seemed like a good guy, but I had no idea what this guy was capable of. I was just taking him to this liquor store. He was definitely intoxicated, and now he's got a knife in his hand. He's about to get out of the car to go into this liquor store. I don't know what he's gonna do, but he's told me that there's gonna be a problem here because of a certain man that he saw inside or outside the liquor store. Some of the details are a little fuzzy here. And I said, no way, man. Absolutely not. Like, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. And at this point, I'm in a panic because I'm like, I just drove this dude to this liquor store, and he's about to go kill this guy, and now I'm going to be arrested too because I drove him to the scene, right? And I'm just trying to convince this guy, look, it's not worth it. Let's just go to a different liquor store. You could beef with this guy some other time. You're drunk, this and that. And he's like, nah, man, no, we got to settle this. He just was very adamant that he was going to go in this liquor store. Anyway, I was able to convince him to not go to this liquor store. So we went to another one, and that's that. And it's funny, I actually have this knife. I own this knife that he had because he ended up putting it in my glove box, and he accidentally forgot it there. I never saw the man again. But you see, like the decisions that I made in that moment, there were some poor decisions, and then there were some good decisions. I would imagine, because I know myself, if I had been drinking that night, I probably would have just let it ride. I probably would have gone with him into the store. You know what I mean? Because that's the kind of guy I was. I wasn't a very strong-willed person, put it that way, when I was drinking. And none of that meant that I deserved to die, right? Like I made some poor decisions in that process, and maybe I made a few good ones. None of that necessarily meant that I deserved to die, but I had injected myself into a situation with a person I didn't know very well, with a person that, apparently had some questionable character and stuff like that. And if I were to have gotten into an altercation, let's just say the situation was reversed, and the guy that he saw at the liquor store saw us first and started shooting into the car because of some kind of beef that I didn't know about, right? I would have been dead, potentially. And it wouldn't necessarily have been my fault, but we can all understand how it was more my fault than it was for an infant in the freaking womb. Andrew, this is an idiotic tweet. It's absolutely idiotic, because the thing is, my mom would be very sad, and you could be very sad for my family because I died in some kind of drug beef, let's just call it, because I didn't know exactly what the beef was. But let's just call it a drug beef because that's popular, right? Yes, certain people would be sad, and you could be sad for my family in a certain way, but it's going to affect you a lot differently than millions and millions and millions and millions of infants dying in the womb for no other purpose but the fact that their mother didn't see their life worth living. It's a big difference, Andrew, and I think you understand that. So what's this tweet about? It's just very difficult to even understand the mindset someone would have to be in to tweet a tweet like this. Because if you look at the majority of the Christian response to Breonna Taylor, right? Because again, as I said, the details of this case are somewhat complicated for a Christian because of the lack of knowledge of the Old Testament, right? If you look at the response, though, of most Christians they admit that it's a sad situation. Breonna Taylor probably didn't deserve to die. There was probably some mix-ups there, but they're not exactly sure how we should adjudicate this thing. Andrew, why don't you put on your scholarly robes and tell us exactly what should have happened here? Because the reality is that it's complicated. Even if you look at the Old Testament case law, it is complicated. Do I think that cops should be able to go into somebody's house, in the middle of the night kind of thing, unannounced and stuff like that, and start shooting? No, I definitely don't think so. But that's how most people see what happened in this case. But that's actually not what happened in this case. They went to the house, they announced themselves, and then they kicked the door down. Then the boyfriend started shooting, and they started shooting back. Now, there is case law here in the Old Testament that talks about this kind of thing. What happens if somebody comes in the middle of the night? Now, in the Bible, it's a robber. A robber comes in the middle of the night. What happens if you end up killing the robber that comes in the middle of the night? Well, that case law probably applies in some way, but as you can see, it's not the same exact situation. It's not the same exact situation. And so, Andrew, you're an Old Testament scholar, and so maybe you just don't know that people don't understand the Old Testament as much as, maybe you do, but even yourself has to know that case laws here it's complicated. It's very complicated what should happen in this situation. Now, what I don't think is necessarily complicated is the boyfriend. I don't know if there's been a decision on the boyfriend being charged with shooting at the cops. To me, that seems like that shouldn't happen. If he didn't know it was the cops, he didn't hear it was the cops, he's telling the 911 dispatch agent that he doesn't know who it is, that kind of thing. That seems fairly believable to me, and I think that the case laws in the Old Testament would probably support him not being charged for the part that he did. The one cop who was charged with a crime, it certainly seems like that cop should have been charged with a crime. Apparently, the neighbors' houses are getting shot up accidentally with his stray bullets, and that's probably very unacceptable for a police officer who should be trained on how to shoot a firearm the correct way. So what I'm saying, though, Andrew King, is that you're trying to make this thing like a race thing. You're trying to make this a race thing. You're trying to make this a cops are all bad kind of thing. And the reality is that we live in a system that is very disconnected from the biblical law, where we do have these police apparatuses that work very differently than did in the Old Testament law. And yeah, maybe we ought to go back there. Maybe we got to look to that law and say, okay, well, how do we make a more just system? But the system we have right now is a certain way. And so Christians understand that, Andrew. You know what I mean? You might want to beat them over the head with this race thing, and let's just make sure that we understand what it is, because if Breonna Taylor was named, Karen Smith, you'd never hear her name. This wouldn't be a thing. You wouldn't have been mourning like crazy all day, Andrew. Let's just face it. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's not about the facts of the case. It's about the fact that she was black. She had black skin, which had nothing to do with the case. And so, Andrew, this tweet is idiotic. It's absolutely idiotic. And I think that you've been roundly told that this is ridiculous. And so you should really consider this one. You should probably add a little bit more color here. You should probably take this one back, because we all understand the difference between abortion and someone who's made very poor choices in her life. I mean, let's just face it. Breonna Taylor chose a terrible boyfriend. And so she's responsible for that kind of thing. She's responsible for for dating a boyfriend that was involved in the things that he was allegedly involved in and things like that. That's part of she needs to own that. She needs to own that. The idea in so much of the woke church is that, it's really just white people's fault, right? It's the white people's fault that have to own their decisions, and really blacks don't have to own their decisions. And that's just not how it is at all. That's not how it is at all. It's absolutely insane. This is a stupid, idiotic, dumb tweet, and that's that. Now, I think there are some lessons that we can learn here, that we can go again back to the Old Testament code and figure out what we should do. I think that that the drug war has to end. I'm not in favor of the drug war. I'm not in favor of executing warrants, no knock or knock, which in this case it was a knock warrant, or at least they did announce themselves and knock. We shouldn't have those for drug cases. But do you really want to take away the ability to raid a house just in general? I mean, let's think about this. Let's try to think a few steps ahead. Okay, so for a drug case, we want to take it away. But maybe what if there was a pedophile ring and there was kids being actively raped inside of a house, and you got a warrant or whatever like that? Do you want to take the ability to conduct a raid from the police altogether? Well, I don't know. Some people don't really seem to want to make distinctions there, but I'm willing. I'm nuanced enough to want to make distinctions like that. To want to look to the Old Testament code and say, is this kind of thing really off the table in all circumstances? I'm not so convinced that it is. I'm not so convinced that it is. And so this is a much more complicated conversation, Andrew, than I think you are willing to virtue signal your amazing virtue on for your seminary and your employer and all that kind of stuff. It's just really pathetic that you want to make it like an issue like this, where it's just like, well, they just don't care because she's not a fetus. Like, you sound like a pagan, Andrew. You sound like a secular humanist. You sound like a freaking rabid anti-Christian village atheist is what you sound like. You sound like the atheist that I used to argue with on Twitter when I first became a Christian. You sound like an idiot. That's what you sound like. Okay, and so you're obviously not an idiot because you're a professor and all of these kinds of things. So why are you sounding like an idiot on this issue? It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Last thing I want to mention is the parable of the talents. Now, last night, if you watched Reformgelical, you got my commentary on the Tim Keller thing about white skin being worth $1 million and how even if you're from Norway, you're still guilty, stuff like that. That was a ridiculous clip. So many people sent it to me this week. And I understand why, because it was so racist and it went so far. But me and Matt last night on Reformgelical were talking about the parable of the talents and how God expects a return on everything that he gives you. Even if he gives you a lot, he expects a return on that. He gives you a medium amount, he expects a return on that. He gives you a little bit, he expects a return on that. And I think the parable of the talents applies in a variety of different ways, right? So God gives you a lot of money. Yeah, he wants you to share your clothes with people who have none, your food with people who have none. And so if you have a lot of extra, you have a lot of money, he's going to expect that you share a lot. But the thing is that rule of if you have a shirt, share it with someone who doesn't have none, the expectation of charity and being generous with what you have, it doesn't go away if you get less. It doesn't go away if you have not as much. And so if you're poor and you only have the one talent, right? You only have the one talent. So relatively speaking, you're poor. There's an inequality there. God is still expecting a return on that. It's not like, because you have more, you have a different set of rules. No, like you actually still do have to give to the poor. You actually still do share with people who don't have enough, no matter if you're rich or poor. And I think that the talents also applies to a situation like this. Like, you have a lot of authority, because let's just go with their narrative of authority and power, right? The white police officers, the evil white police officers have a lot of authority, and they've got responsibilities before God to do the right thing and to make the right decisions and to make smart decisions and to be wise. Fine. But guess what? In this little narrative, in this little fantasy story of white cops with all the power hunting black people with none of the power, Breonna Taylor also had responsibilities. She had responsibilities to be wise, to do the right thing, to be smart about things, to maybe not live with her boyfriend, stuff like that. And again, don't hear me saying she deserved to die or she had it coming. But the reality is, to try to compare Breonna Taylor's situation, which was partially her making, with someone who is in the womb, just in there growing the way that little baby is supposed to do, and then just sucked out mercilessly with a vacuum cleaner, or stuck in the head with a poison or something like that, is absolutely unbiblical in every way. It's insane. And all you're seeking to do, Andrew, because I think you know how insane it is, all you're seeking to do is to put yourself up here, how wise and good and virtuous and wonderful I am, and put your fellow Christians down here because they're just a bunch of Neanderthal racist bigots. And I, for one, am freaking sick of it. I'm freaking sick of it. And so your salary gets paid by all of these bigots that you're talking about here. So I would maybe think twice before you tweet nonsense online like this about situations that are obviously more complicated than you're trying to make them seem, all so that you look really good and holy and righteous. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. I'm going to do a fun video later. God bless.